Okay, I'd like to call the September 18th, 2023 Board of Education Committee meeting to order. Ms. Parker, if we could begin with a roll call, please.
Chair Cobb,
Here.
Dr. Sheila Williams, present. Tommy Old.
Here.
Ms. Valerie Rose. Here. Ann Preza. Here. Rodney Walton. And Sharon Moore. Present.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Old, if you would read our ethics awareness statement, please.
Welcome to the September 18th, 2023 meeting of the Elizabeth City Pasquotank Board of Education. It is my duty to remind members of the board that it is your responsibility to avoid all conflicts of interest and potential conflicts of interest in accordance with Chapter 138A of North Carolina General Statutes. As public servants, it is your duty to continually monitor, evaluate, and manage your personal, financial, and professional affairs in such a way as to ensure the absence of conflicts or potential conflicts. Does any member know of any conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest with respect to any matter coming before the board today? If there are no conflicts, let the record reflect that no conflicts exist.
Thank you, Mr. Old. At this time, I need a motion to approve the agenda for today.
I so move.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Warden. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Walton, thank you. Do we have any discussion? All right, Ms. Parker, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Sheila Williams. Yes. Tommy Old.
Yes.
Ms. Valerie Rose.
Yes.
Ann Preza.
Yes.
Rodney Walton.
Yes.
And Sharon Moore.
Yes.
Okay, so moved and seconded. We voted to approve today's agenda. We are going to now get into the agenda items of our meeting, and we're going to begin with the Financial Business and Technology Committee, and I will now turn the meeting over to the chair of that committee, Ms. Warden.
I am the chair, and I am going to defer this to my co-chair, Mr. Walton,
All right.
who is going to conduct things today.
Thank you, Ms. Warden. And I will call Ms. Rachel Haynes, the Assistant Superintendent of Finance, to come and present to us this evening.
Chair Cobb, Vice Chair Pereza, Committee Chair, Ms. Warden, and Vice Committee Chair, Mr. Walton. Good evening, board members. Good evening. Finance has a few items on the agenda tonight. The first being FBT01, the purchasing report, and this is for information only. Are there any questions on the report that was submitted? If there are no questions on that report, the next three items we would like the board to take action on this evening. The first one being FBT02, which is the furniture quotes for the Innovative Technology Labs, both at Northeastern and Pasquotank County High School. And I think Mr. Dexter Jackson Hurd and Mr. Lane have been working on these projects. So if you have any questions about the items or the quotes, they'll be happy to answer those questions.
When do you anticipate these items arriving, or have they already arrived?
They have not arrived yet.
Okay,
We're just waiting. Once you take action, then we'll
okay.
order.
So when do you anticipate
I think
their
I
arrival?
think he said after he was saying possibly December, but that's pushing it. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Yeah, they would definitely be here before, they'd be here
Right.
before December.
They're aware of the grant money, and so they know that they have a certain window to operate within.
Okay,
This includes installation too.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. It is a state contracted vendor. It's also
Okay, that was
been,
my next question.
yeah, the quote before you's been negotiated and compared to, quotes from other companies as well.
My question was, I'm not a esports person, so I'm assuming we're getting the state-of-the-art technology.
Yes. We've
And
already-
these are innovative technology labs that,
Yes.
that they'll be going into.
And this is just the furniture. You already have it.
So are the labs up and running or not?
In terms of the actual computers, no, we're actually in transition now, and they should be within the next couple of weeks. Heather is actually working on them now to make sure that we get the computers in the labs.
Can you tell me, what is the gaming table? What does it look like? I'm curious, like the gaming tables, what do they look like?
It'd be more, well, it won't be really gaming tables. It'll be more, so just to elaborate, it's going to be more for the learning, first it's gonna be set up as more of a learning hub first. That's the main priority of this space is learning hub. So it'll be where it's kind of has a multi-purpose. So we're using laptop PCs as well as desktop PCs for the gaming. So it won't look like, I guess, when you think about gaming, a lot of people think about Xbox and PlayStation, things like that. It's not gonna be like that kind of setup. It's gonna be more of a flexible type of space where there's gonna be learning, but at the same time, there'll also be that whole gaming piece as well. So the spaces will be desk, kind of like, not quite desk style, but kind of flex furniture, so to speak, where we'll have monitors and the desktops being set up by stations, and then students will then interact with them during the day and in the evening.
We can get pictures
We
of the
just
furniture
curious.
and share with the board.
Yeah. We
so
can
that you
send
can
reader
see
drawings.
what they're,
Okay.
what they're talking.
Our students
Similar
are,
to what you saw in UNCG, that's the best way to describe
I
it.
was
Similar
just
to that.
getting ready.
Yes.
Similar to what.
Similar to
you
that. I guess that's to give you a vision,
Okay,
yes.
yeah, that's kind of.
I think that's what you're trying,
Thank
yes,
you.
I got you.
Okay.
so our students already enrolling or signing up for this?
Yes, yes,
Okay, but there's a limit, right?
yes, have to put it in.
And we've got really kind of two ways going. So these learning labs will be spaces where kids can access computer science content during the day and earn a course credit for it, but they don't have to be in the learning lab all day long. So that'll allow some kids to access the modules on the weekend, potentially. Some may go during lunch. And that's why we call these innovative labs. Pastor Tank will have one in the media center, which is right there on the side. And then Northeastern's going to be the cybersecurity room that we're kind of converting into some of this work. And then in the afternoons, the esports team will compete. And so they'll come in like a team would and be there in the afternoon and have a coach. And then we're going to pay that coach coaching style. So kind of got two spaces. They'll be using the same computer, same hardware, but and you may have kids that are in both things. They might be in the computer science class getting course credit, but also they're on the sports team.
And have you already got the coaches in place? Do you
Yes.
know who they are?
Yes, yes, we do. We have coaches at both schools, yes.
And what sort of led us down this path is we received a grant that's funding most of this for Northeastern. And so that teacher has been hired through the grant, and she's already recruiting and getting some kids moving and in there. Even though we've not launched esports yet, we're still recruiting kids, and that's boots on the ground. And then with Pasquotank, we don't have a funded instructor yet because the grant was only for one school, but we are using staff at Pasquotank that are going to help us provide the same resources to the kids with the goal of then adding an instructor as we move into year 2.
What's been the student response so far? Do we have any ideas about, like how many people are interested? Or I know we have a limit. Are we leaning more towards we're going to cap out? Or are we leaning more towards we need to do a lot more recruitment? Do we have a feel for that yet?
I think generally the kids are moving faster than we are
Yeah.
out there. So
That's what it's
I
right.
think a part of this work is how do you launch something brand new? The furniture's not even arrived yet. You got a brand new instructor and provide a quality experience for kids where the kids are ready to go. So a part of this is building the work, but I think there's a lot of kids that want to get involved.
Absolutely.
So there's a high interest, more than we can serve initially. So we've got to build out quality structures where kids can access the content, and that's a work in progress. I would say by the time we get to December and January, we will really have figured out how to walk and chew gum at the same time. So, we're building this, but it's an exciting time. We're doing something new, we're doing something different. And in that comes figuring out how to go from there. So it's a work in progress, but we're very excited about it.
How long is the instructor funded at Northeastern?
It's 1 year as of this year.
But additional funding is being, so since the work we're doing is with TIP or Spark NC, and so right now they have us funded for 1 year, but they are looking for additional funding beyond this.
And how are we going to pay for an instructor for Pasquotank next year?
So what we're gonna do is ideally we could qualify for more grant funding. If that were not to happen, then we're working with Ms. Fife and Ms. Moore to figure out how within their allotment structure, they provide a teacher for that classroom, but they just make it work. And that might mean they're moving somebody, they're adjusting, but.
Yeah, I understand the funding. I just don't want it to seem unfair to one school or another. I understand the grant was for Northeastern, but you got 2 high schools.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that they understand, Ms. Moore understands that, you know, going forward, that they're not going to be forgotten.
Like 3 high schools, or including straight.
Well, really is early college too.
So that's what I'm saying, so including
Yeah.
early college, or what thoughts and considerations are given to the early college and straight.
So- I can speak on that. So actually, so just so you understand, what's funded at Northeastern is pretty much the space in terms of the furniture and, part of the equipment
And then
and the instructor, correct. But in addition to that, in terms of the actual software that, for students to have access to that software, to get that same credit that Dr. Parker mentioned, that is available to as many students as we want to sign up. So the bottom line is, even though we're limited in terms of space, in terms of the actual classroom setting, and we're not limited. So the bottom line is, like you said, it's a flexible type of course where they can take it at any time. So they don't even have to be in the class to still get out access to the class.
Like the modules format that we saw at UNCG.
Correct.
And they do it kind of on their own time,
Yes.
and it's mastery based.
Yes.
Do I remember?
Yes.
Okay, I remember it was mastery based, and they do it on their own time.
That is correct.
So that applies to anybody in our district that
Yes.
meets the qualifications.
Yes. And we're also looking at things towards the summertime as well, in terms of just how we can use this same space to actually create things for during the summertime as well for students.
This may be a strange question, but does esports teams have seasons?
Yes.
Like football has a
Yes, it is
season, and
just-
so are there
it
certain
is
sports
just like
played
that.
at certain
Yes.
times?
And we are part of a league. Yes. So
Okay.
yes. So this is like, we're in the fall league right now. We'll also be in the spring league as well.
And our league is through UNCG.
Correct.
So when kids start practicing and then ultimately compete, they'll be competing against other high school students in the state that are in UNCG's.
Correct.
So they'll actually be competing.
Yes.
They won't just be, playing games. They'll be actually in competitions through that. So
And if a student's out there that really, really likes a game and it's not offered, that really doesn't mean anything because it might be offered in the spring season.
Correct.
could be.
Okay.
And we're looking for ways to
They're
expand.
expanding
Yeah.
their game offerings.
Okay.
UNCG is.
Correct.
So it's a new space that we're venturing into, so we're learning a lot of things, and we're I would say in the last month and a half, when our new instructors come on, we've kind of gone into warp speed. So we're moving quickly, and a lot of these pieces are coming together. So yeah, it's exciting.
And school staff is currently handling Pasquotank, is that right? Current
Correct.
school staff?
Yes.
Yeah, who's at Pasquotank that's involved?
Sean,
What's her name?
Shauna White.
Shauna White. And then that, but now
Yeah.
they have a dual role going on in terms of the esports piece. In terms of that part is Davis. What's his name? Javon.
Davis is the coach.
And so he'll be the coach, and then Ms. White will be the actual instructor doing that. Whereas the young person, yeah.
And we're kind of dabbling into a lot of things here. So like early college doesn't have the esports yet, but they got the brand new MacBooks. So ultimately, we want early college to be able to compete too, but there's different things right now in different pockets.
Correct.
And we're looking at a unique model for Trig, so it's, we're testing and innovating some things, building up capacity and expand. Thanks.
For the coach piece, are we looking at the prospect of coaches like do for athletics?
Right.
I mean, so if there's somebody in our community that's already really involved in gaming and that's an interest or an area that they excel, that might be an opportunity for them to serve our district.
Correct.
If they meet the requirements to be
Yes.
employed, because I guess they would be employed as
Yeah.
a coach,
As a
just like the football coach.
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
Are there plans to have the community come in and see this?
Yes,
Once again.
definitely, definitely.
Definitely.
We get the furniture.
Once we get
you know,
everything-
We
As
get
soon
it
as you get
together.
everything
Yes.
in there, okay.
And the cool thing is we order laptops and desktops, so the
Yes.
kids can start gaming even before the furniture gets here. Because, you know, they may be practicing in the library after school. So they can go ahead and get the teams formed and get into the fall season and read, even though we're having to work on the furniture. Right.
Would it be appropriate for us to even think about a ribbon cutting?
Cool.
That is actually one of the plans. So, like, especially for Northeastern, because it's actually sponsored by Spark. So we would definitely want to do something like that when, like, as I say, a grand opening, I guess, of both spots. But we would definitely want to be partnered with Spark in terms of doing it at Northeastern because they're funding part of that space.
Any other questions on the?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yes.
Your interest is good.
Take your excitement, multiply it by 5. That's the-
Yes, yes, very much so. Yes.
And we're moving as quickly as we can,
Yes,
we
we are.
understand.
Yes, we are.
The next item on the agenda, FBT 03, is the fundraising list for this week. Are there any questions on the fundraisers that were submitted? And then the next item for action this evening, FBT 04, is the bid award for the Sheep Kearney Elementary School underground hot water heating pipe project. Ms. Wilkins is here. Ms. Wilkins has been working with DPI on this project. And I believe Matt from DPI actually bid this project for us. And attached in your packet is the tabulation sheet, the recommendation for award, and the bid documents behind that. If you have any questions, Ms. Wilkins is here to answer questions on that project or that bid. And this is part of the piping project that we submitted as a capital request this year.
Is this replacing the pipe that was repaired? Is that what that is?
You have to ask Ms. Wilkins. I'll have to ask Ms. Wilkins.
How much are we spending repairing? Approximately.
Approximately, this portion of it's 56,000, and I think we spent about 8,000 on the other side. Yes, DPI reached out to four vendors. One of them didn't respond. Two of them so elected to not submit a bid. Due to the timeline, they wanted a quick turnaround so they would have, it completed for them to have heat for the cold season.
And this company can?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
They were the only company that.
So
could do it.
what's the anticipated completion?
Turnaround time, once we've approved, they're saying at least 2 week time.
Should be good.
So we'd like to get it done before October.
Yes.
You know, get started by October, so we can. Is there any other questions on that project? Did you want to do these three and then the other, or do you want to go along with one?
We could do these three now. Yes. So if you have no questions, I'd like to make a motion to approve FPT 02, Carolina Furnishing Design Proposal Numbers 2023-5279, 2023-5204, 2023-5282, and fundraisers, FPT 03 fundraisers and FPT 04 bid awards for Sheep Kearney Elementary School's underground hot water heating pipe, DPI project number 2307.
Okay.
Should we get a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, Ms. Parker, can we have a vote on that motion, please?
Dr. Sheila Williams. Yes. Tommy All.
Yes.
Ms. Valerie Bose.
Yes.
Aunt Freza.
Yes.
Rodney
Yes.
Walton. And Sharon Moore.
Yes.
And Mr. Walton, the final item on the agenda tonight is FBT 05, and that's budget amendments 101 and 301, and we're requesting those be placed on the consent agenda for approval at the regular board meeting. The first amendment is 101, and this is for the state public school fund. It's an overall increase of $227,861, and that's for an allotment for technology and then the carryover funds from the school safety grant. And then the second amendment is number 301 to the federal grants fund, and that's an increase of $348,491.79. And that is for PRC 109, which is RLIS, and PRC 195, which is one of our ESSO grants. Are there any questions on the bill tonight? So if there are no questions, then we would like to place those on the consent agenda.
And I'll make a motion to place FBT 05 budget amendments number 101 and 301 on the consent agenda for the September regular board meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Parker, can we get a vote, please?
Dr. Sheila Williams. Yes. Tommy Owen.
Yes.
Ms. Valerie Bowie.
Yes.
Karen Plaza.
Yes.
Rodney
Yes.
Wilson. Michelle Williams.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Haynes, I do have one other question, and I don't know where it falls,
Okay.
because this one wasn't mentioned, about the purchase orders over 30,000.
Mhm.
I was just curious about this Jessica Troxwell.
She is the behavior coach. Her contract was approved with the EC contracts that were previously approved.
Okay,
This is just a purchase order to cover those funds.
Because it was, okay.
Because it's over 30, it
Right.
flags automatically
Okay.
on the report.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's all. I'll thank Ms. Haynes for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Thank you, Mr. Walton and Ms. Warden. Now we're going to move on to the policy committee with Tommy Old as our chair.
And I defer to Dr. Parker.
Joel?
You're it.
Appreciate it. Want to talk a little bit tonight about some policies we're bringing to the board tonight. I'm going to ask the board to waive the first reading on those policies and take action tonight. Want to go back to our last meeting and kind of start there. I want to thank Johnny and John and Cornthal for working on drafting some policies at the last meeting. When we were last together, we at that point did not have suggested policies from the North Carolina School Boards Association as it relates to the recently passed legislation that's being termed Parents' Bill of Rights, Senate Bill, now Law 49. And so talking with Johnny, we felt really comfortable to just recommend the full set of policies from the School Board Association that have similarities and overlap to the policies that Johnny brought to us last meeting. But to be consistent with other school boards, what we're doing now is we're taking those recommendations from last meeting off, and we're just going to recommend that the board adopt the policies from the North Carolina School Boards Association that you have listed on the agenda. So I just want to summarize just a couple of things there. One, these policies reflect really three parts of S49, Parents' Bill of Rights. One, the law lays out essentially 10 specific rights of parents to have involvement on their child's education. Secondly, a part of the law has a big focus on parent notification and parent guidance, particularly for the school districts to develop a guide to notify parents of their legal rights for their child's education and a guide for student achievement. And we're working internally to develop these guides and to have those ready to share with parents. As the board remembers from our presentation last meeting, the law was passed by the legislator after the school year started. And so Elizabeth City Pasquotank Public Schools, like all the other districts in the state, are working very hard to be able to fulfill these requirements, knowing that the school year has already begun. The law sets timelines for parents' request of notification of information. It requires us to notify parents related to their students' physical and mental health It has some requirements and restrictions on age-appropriate instruction for grades K through 4, as it relates to gender identity, sexual activity, and sexuality. And it creates platforms for parents to address concerns over implementation of these policies, and then notification for parents over surveys, particularly protected surveys. The final component of the law is parent authorization for healthcare of minors. And so this is a provision of the law that by law does not take effect until December 1st, but a portion of the law that does require specific written parent consent for treatment for children based on any medical treatment they may receive at school. So those are the 3 buckets to the law, and the School Boards Association has presented some revisions to policies that implicate that. So all the 3 buckets I just talked to you about are reflected in these policies you see here that the School Boards Association has been working the past several weeks to revise policies on. So we're making a recommendation to the board tonight to go ahead and take action on these policies and waive the first reading so that we can go ahead and move into compliance with the law. Again, the law was passed after the school year began, but it doesn't take effect at the start of the school year. What I would say is we are working internally to be able to develop the parent notification guides and to revise some of our internal processes and documents as it relates to some of these timelines. And so that is some work we're doing right now internally and working as fast as we can. But like all the other districts in the state, we have some work to do to be able to devise these documents. They're complicated, complex documents that is going to take some work before we can be able to have those ready to share with parents. So I want to take some questions from the board, but Johnny, anything you might want to add or jump in on there?
I think you've given a great summary, Dr. Parker. As he mentioned, we did present a number of draft policies to the board in the last meeting, and NCSBA surprised us and came out with these policies very quickly, and they are really similar in terms of content to the policies that John and I came up. They're structured and worded a little bit differently, but we strongly suggest that you go ahead and adopt these policies tonight. They're good policies, they're sound, they're well written, and there's a provision in the Parents' Bill of Rights that requires you to report your policies that relate to the Parents' Bill of Rights to the State Board of Education at the end of every school year. And what a better way to show them our participation and compliance than using the policies that have been supplied by NCSBA.
Any questions from?
Yeah, I still have the same question from last time.
Okay.
Have to do with the surveys. I read the law about 10 times. There's nothing in there that says we have to do surveys. It tells you what you need to do if you do surveys. And my question is, why are we doing surveys? And if we are, who's doing them and for what reason?
Yeah. So we've had some conversation even here recently about protected surveys, which the law specifically mentions what is defined as a protected survey. And so, you may have a teacher or principal that may want to survey kids on what's your favorite class, right? We survey kids oftentimes in their interest before they go and register for classes. That's not a protected survey. There's not anything about, personally identifiable information. A kid just may say, I'm really into sports, so I want to take, sports medicine or something along those lines. That is something that principals and teachers could just go ahead and administer, as they kind of done. As it falls into a protected survey, then the law specifically now speaks to those kind of things and then requires, parent consent on some of those. We were talking about that. Anything you want to add, Johnny, if you could, on the protected and what qualifies specifically about a protected survey?
That's exactly right. And if you look at the law, you've seen there's some categories that are protected, but that's, that's really what this policy is getting at. And even before this Parents' Bill of Rights came out, the Protection of People Amendments Act, it's a federal law, had these surveys protected as well. So you already had to do this stuff. It just wasn't clearly reflected in state law or in policies.
Well, I guess I'm going back to my original question, is why are we doing surveys? And now I understand the initial surveys, I did them when I talked. But my question is, are we gonna know what kind of surveys are being done in our schools? Because I can tell you right now, there's gonna be parents that are gonna be asking. And you've already said, working on how parents are gonna be notified. So that I understand the law just came out. That's gonna be important to how parents know what little Johnny is being asked to do in school. And how they're able to opt out of it if they so choose.
Well, I think one of those pieces, Mr. Old, is there's gonna be two things that, because of this law, will probably become embedded in educators' vocabulary. And one is gonna be, have you talked to your parent about that? You know, asking kids to say, before I counsel or discuss this topic with you, do your parents know that we're talking about this? Or are your parents aware of it? You know, I think that's one of the things that even counselors are just gonna have to build into their processes. The second part is, we're gonna have to educate staff on, you know, what is an appropriate survey that you can administer, and then what are some that you just can't do that. Now, some information we don't want to ask. We don't want to collect that information, and we wouldn't want to give surveys that would pry into, you know, religious beliefs or some of those other things that I mean, that's not something we want to do. But we're going to have to make sure we educate staff, and that will be one of the benefits of these guides, is clarifying, you know, what's an appropriate question or series of questions you can ask kids, because staff are going to initially be very concerned that they could fall into these categories of recourse that parents have. So to protect our staff, you know, we're going to have to educate them on, you know, what is appropriate, what does the law provide for, what it doesn't. But if your question is going to, are we asking protecting information? You know, I can't think of a time when we are right now. And the question is, would we want to do that? I think the question is, we want to honor certain things that are unique to students. And when I look at that protected category, I can't think of ways where we would want to ask them. But we want to give teachers the ability to be able to get to know their kids, you know, and distinguishing between those two things is something we just want to have to educate on. In terms of answering the question, did that hit the mark, or is that still?
Not really, but
Let
this didn't either.
let me give an example that might help. So when I look at the protected topics, I don't see a whole lot on here that I would envision a teacher asking.
You're right,
But
you're right.
being a former high school teacher, and especially an English language arts teacher, and I can see this also in a possible history class or in an art class. And I know myself, I've done activities with students where we've put up a controversial topic and they've had to go in the room, in a place in the room where they stood, where they felt about that topic. Or you're looking at debate in an English class or something along that line. It could ask the beliefs of the student, this first one, political affiliation or beliefs of the student or the student's parents. So I think to protect our teachers, we're gonna have to really be specific about, these are the kinds of things that you can ask. Yeah, I can ask you what your favorite sport is, I can ask you, you know, but we also need to be very specific about, you know, how are you going to handle a situation if you're talking about something controversial, a hot topic in your education, in your curriculum, in your classroom, and not cross that line into asking about a student's beliefs. I think that's going to be an intricate walk to walk as an educator.
Well, I'm not looking to limit what teachers do.
No,
However, the way the law is written, it adds protections in there for certain things. So that lends me to believe that somebody somewhere thinks that those types of questions could be asked in a classroom environment. Because let's face it, we all come from different walks of life, and so do teachers, and so do students, and so do their parents. And I just want to make sure, I think I don't want to restrict and say, okay, you can only ask these 10 things. That's not what I'm saying. On the other hand, we do need to have some firm guidance for our staff so that they know, okay, I'm okay. It's a presidential election coming up. It's okay to ask A, B, or C. Okay, because I know that's been done for years. They've always done that in the classroom. But also in a different capacity, asking somebody's parents' political affiliation or their religious background or anything, or any kind of demographic information, I think is improper. And I'm just want to make sure that that's not done. The state's law allows it to be protected. My question is still, why are we doing it? And if we are going to do it, having more guidelines. And you've said that, Dr. Parker. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I am beating it because of what I just said.
And when I look at that list, you know, I've not done an analysis of every survey that's been given in the past 3 years, but when I look at that list, I couldn't right now tell you that we've asked those questions here. You know, that would not be something that is a practice of us to ask. Now, if those questions have been asked, you know, it's unbeknownst to me, and it's not something that is part of a formal process we would have, because those would be things that, you know, we would honor as protected. You know, so I don't see that being a concern that we have. I think the law now in our school district, I think the law now just specifies that in a deeper way. And we've got to keep training teachers on it.
We're down in the sense of, I think you guys mentioned this, you know, we do a mental health needs assessment. And we have screeners that we use to develop plans and what we need. And we have the student health advisory committee that was discussed, that these things are going to impact those types of programs that we use to, and I'm looking at the plan right now because we worked on it. They've been working on it. And, you know, there are screeners that actually look at, you know, needs, screening for mental health and things like that. So that would be an example of where we would have to really be careful with what kind of program we use to make sure that it follows North Carolina's guidelines. Because if this is something that's used nationally, you need to make sure that it follows, or that the parent opts in to their child being allowed to take. Is that right, John?
That's
They have to
right.
opt in to take the
That's right.
survey.
And that's one of the main things. And we're not there yet, I know, with how the parents are going to be notified, but that's going to be very important.
Yeah. And I think that's an example of an area where we're definitely going to have a process to say, you know, you can no longer administer anything related to that unless it's gone through a vetting process. Because that, I'm not worried about the teacher in the classroom trying to teach the election, but it's these screeners or questions that may help identify mental health support for students for well-being. That's where the law is going to drill down. You know, one example of that is, I think, you know, to the point about critical appraisals of individuals with close family relationships, you know, you learn a lot about somebody by their family. You know, we want educators to be able to talk to kids about their family. You know, a simple question could be, tell me the last time that you had a great time with a family. What'd you do? Did you go to the park? You know, I mean, those are harmless questions that can help you build a relationship with kids in a safe way. But that question I just asked about, tell me the last time you had a great experience with a family member, that kind of falls under E. You know, a critical appraisal of a respondent who you have a family relationship. So that's where there's some diciness about how this is going to be interpreted. So initially, I think we're going to have to just press pause on some of these formal things and really continue to develop a vetting process internally. Because we want to protect our staff who are well-intentioned, but we don't want them to get trapped into a nuance of legalese that could put them in the situation of being put under a microscope. So, you know, when we get these guides and we kind of drill in, we're going to have to go very slow. And I think counselors, support staff that work with kids that have experienced trauma, that's going to be under the microscope. That's going to be the ones we're really going to have to try to break it down.
Last question. I promise. Are we smart as a board to approve these before we have guidelines set up for how we're going to administer these with the parents?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that, Johnny, and I did. I think, you know, I think the initial response is approving them shows the willingness of the board to comply with the law. The law was passed after the school year began, but requires districts to honor this at the start of the school year. So I think the law has already been passed. So the state law supersedes board policy anyway. So there's not a reason not to pass them, because if somebody were to say, well, hey, you don't have your parent guide, it's already state law. I mean, so that there's really not a reason for the board to wait, because state law has already been passed and it supersedes board policy. This is just a way of the board showing that we're going to comply with the law, but like every other district, we got to build the content out. In regard, Johnny, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I think it's definitely wise to adopt these policies. The law itself technically requires these to have been adopted the day it was passed. Obviously, we didn't do that, and we didn't have policies, created. We didn't know this thing was going to be overridden by our legislature. That just kind of happened. We expected it, but we didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. But the bottom line is that the law does require these policies to be in place. And like Dr. Parker said, even if we don't have every little procedure and every form drilled down at this point, we do have to have these things in place under the Parents' Bill of Rights. And they're not huge changes to your policies either. Some of them are relatively extensive, but they were things that were already required by state law.
I think there's two things too to take into account with this that are important. First of all, this does give us some guideline and structure, versus if we don't adopt anything, then we are being held to the policies that are already in place. Second of all, this is not just ECPPS. This came from the School Board Association. So there are other, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are other districts across the state of North Carolina that have this verbiage in their policy manuals from the School Boards Association. So it's not like we're striking out on our own. But I think those, at least if we do move that way, then we're moving towards what we're required to have and not bound to what we have now.
I think you're exactly right, and you're right. I mean, a lot of these do have guidelines for you. They have deadlines. They have methods of notifying parents. They tell you when you have to notify a parent at the beginning of the year and 10 days before providing the survey. If a parent wants to request certain information from a textbook or review a supplementary material, they have to submit a request in writing to the principal, and that's outlined in the policies.
Do we have a rough idea, and I'm not trying to pin you down, do we have a rough idea when we're gonna have procedures outlined? Because the teacher's gonna wanna know, if you're gonna disseminate this to the teachers and the staff and the principals, I mean, if I was a teacher, I wanna know, how am I gonna do this?
I think good question. I think the goal for us is, as we move into the end of this month, 1st of October, we're working hard on it. I think the thing, our message to staff right now is the direct implication to staff comes around the things that the law specifically addresses. K4 instruction as it relates to gender identity, sexual activity, sexuality, those protected surveys. And then what is highly disputed right now with legal interpretation is the response that staff can give for medical treatment, and particularly in the cases of emergency treatment. Those are the areas that the law is the highlight. Other than that, staff can continue to do business as usual.
Do we have any guidance on the medical? Because I know we talked about that last month.
Well, we're working through some of that guidance. I think we're working through some of that guidance, and the legislator is. I mean, there's some work around that language. It doesn't take effect until 12/1. So right now we're not bound to that language, and it's our hope that there's some amendments to the law that get some clarity before December.
I just wanted to add, even though I know it's a rush to get it done, to provide guidance for teachers, we also don't want to rush in this summer.
Right.
And so I'm sure that you're going to collaborate like with any RESA, those in that group, because if you're all having to do the same thing, probably and hopefully you'll be able to gain information from one another. And then of course we're going to the conference, school board conference, and asking questions, and those are things that we should be doing there anyway, and to help to develop this. So
So,
rather than having to do it alone, we may learn from others. And I'm sure that as a team, we'll all do that.
that's all at once. And with superintendents and in the recent, in our groups, this has been the priority conversation in a lot of circles. So, that's one piece there, but I would say, the essential thing for us is we have to, on some of the things that Pam was talking about, we're just going to have to just press pause on, some of these things and say, stop, no surveys go out until, we can clarify and we can vet. So we're in the process so that'll be some of the communication to staff, I think, initially. And I would add to, Chair Cobb, your point about school boards, having prepared this, in addition to the legal team at the North Carolina School Boards Association, Mortal Riley and Johnny have reviewed the school board's policies. So they've gone through an additional layer of vetting and have been working on this the past week. So in addition to the interpretation of the school boards, John and Johnny have reviewed these policies yet again as they relate specifically to our context. So we've gone through, a layer of vetting those policies.
So are we ready to do motions for them?
Are you going to do another Parker, or you mean?
My recommendation B is if we could do two motions, one to suspend 2420 and then a motion to vote on the policies.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to suspend policy 2420.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Ms. Parker, can we have a vote on the suspension?
Dr. Sheila Williams, yes. Tommy Old,
Yes.
Ms. Valerie Rhodes,
Yes.
Pam Preza,
Yes.
Rodney Walker,
Yes.
and Sharon Williams.
Yes.
So the motion is passed to suspend policy 2420.
Recommend adoption of policies and waiving the first read policies of 1310/402 parent involvement, 3210 parental inspection and objection to instructional materials, 3540 comprehensive health education program, 4335 criminal behavior, 4720 surveys of students, 6120 student health services, 7300 staff responsibilities, and 3620 extracurricular activities and student organizations.
We have a second.
Second.
Ms. Parker, did you get that second? Okay. Do we have any discussion? Okay, if we can get a vote for that, please.
Dr. Sheila Williams, yes. Tommy Old,
Yes.
Ms. Valerie Rhodes,
Yes.
Pam Preza,
Yes.
Rodney Walker,
Yes.
and Sharon Williams.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. At this time, Dr. Williams, can you take us into closed?
A motion for the board to go into closed session is allowed by NC General Statute 143 through 318, 1186, for the purpose of considering one or more personnel matters that are confidential under NC General Statute 115C through 320, and is allowed by the NC Statute 143 through 318, 1183, to consult with the board attorney regarding matters protected by the attorney-client privilege and to preserve that privilege.
Okay, we have a motion to go into closed session. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Walton has seconded. Do we have any discussion? All right, Ms. Parker, can we have a vote, please?
Dr. Sheila Williams, yes. Tommy Old,
Yes.
Ms. Valerie Rhodes,
Yes.
Pam Preza,
Yes.
Rodney Walker.
Yes.
And Sharon.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we are now